So we started last week 139 and got through 9, I think.
Seven or 8.
No,
We was
7.
on 7, and then we're ready for 8, but you said we might come back to 7. I thought that's what.
Well, I'd like to get a running start on it.
So say,
But anyways, but this is 139 is a Psalm of David. So it's to the choirmaster, a Psalm of David. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You hem me in behind and before, and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain it. And then, if we got all the way to 7, it says, where shall I go from your spirit, or where shall I flee from your presence? And the first bit there, the 1 through 6, as our notes here kind of have, is talking about God's omniscience, the fact that He knows everything. And not just that God knows everything, but He knows everything specifically about each one of us. He knows our sitting downs, our rising up. Basically, it's like whatever we're doing, whether we're resting, if we're active, doesn't matter. God has searched us and knows us. He knows us individually. And as David has in verse 6 there, such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain it. It's hard to believe and to really comprehend what it means, the fact that God, the Creator, knows us, that He cares to know us and to know everything about us and to be concerned about us. When it says there that you hem me in behind and before and lay your hand on me or upon me, it's talking about how that God's like protection is around us, and that He, His loving watch care over us is always there, because He knows all this stuff about us and knows what we need and as we need it. And you kind of think about Job a little bit there, about how that God basically kind of lowered the protection that was around him to kind of prove a point, but God never abandoned him, never left him. And had we got through question 7?
We were doing the Sheol thing with not really hail, and it's not really hail, but you said
Sheol. Yeah, good point. We went through the first one there, the fact that the psalmist declares that the Lord has searched him and known him. God has searched us and known us. It means He's not just a cursory glance, He's examined us, like an in-depth examination, like you might get at the doctor. But God has known us better than we know ourselves even. It says God knows the psalmist sitting down and his rising up in question 2. And the Lord comprehends the psalmist's path and his lying down. Again, all of his ways, where we're going, where we've been.
I was looking for some glasses, and there was a pair in the office. And I picked them up, put them on, and realized one of the lenses is gone.
Did you
That was
leave
weird.
Did you leave a pair in the pew? You don't usually.
No, I took those home.
Yeah. What strength are yours?
A 2.
No, mine will be too strong.
You have to get the Salvation Army, are they the ones? The Knights of Columbus, maybe, that have all the glasses that you turn in, used glasses. The Lions Club, there you go.
Lions Club.
Maybe we can get one of those boxes and just have a bunch of loners. But question 4, there is not a word on the psalmist's tongue that the Lord does not know. And in question 5, the Lord has hedged the psalmist behind and before, again, protection. And the psalmist in question 6 asks where he can go from the Lord's Spirit. Where can I go from your Spirit? So that's kind of in number 7 there. And it's starting to talk about God's omnipresence, the fact that God is everywhere. And then we got, wouldn't say hung up, but started to discuss about, on question 7 there, a lot of translations have, if I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there. But the correct term, basically, it's kind of a thing where, like, we have since, like, attached certain meaning to hell, meaning like the lake of fire and the torments, and what in the New Testament in Matthew is Gehenna, or the lake of fire in Revelation. But the word here is Sheol, and it has the sense of the grave, or by implication, the afterlife. So it's not talking specifically about hell, but it is talking about as a contrast of like God's presence in heaven down to even in the afterlife. We're never away from God's presence. He's always there. So the answer to 7 is that the psalmist makes his bed in hell.
Is that where
God
the
is there.
Catholic get purgatory?
Purgatory, I don't know where they get that from, if that's more of a money-making idea, where they can basically get donations to keep praying to get the person into heaven.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
somebody told me, or one of the Catholic guys, you're just for $13,000, you can pray your grandpa into heaven if he wasn't saved or nothing like that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of a deal that, there's no basis for it within Scripture that says that, if after you die, then there's like some sort of way that you can start, earning,
There's no waiting room.
yeah, there's no coupons to earn to get yourself into heaven. Basically it's appointed a man wants to die, and after that, judgment. What's that?
How do you spell it? Sheol.
Sheol, S, capital S, and then Heol. It's probably not pronounced Sheol, but that's what I've always heard.
Sheol?
But yeah, Sheol, basically the place of the dead. And I don't know, Chase the Rabbit talking about like the rich man and Lazarus when he died. They both went to Sheol. One spot of it, one portion of it was Abraham's bosom, and that's the paradise part. And another part was torment, and that's where like the rich man wound up because he didn't care about God when he was alive. But then the idea is that those have been like preached to and have taken up to heaven.
Would that be a separate place other than Hades?
Yeah.
Because they talk about Hades as a holding place until heaven.
That's
No.
after Jesus came.
Right.
Yeah, after Jesus, then like the thought would be that paradise part was empty, and there's still the torment place for those who die without knowing Jesus. Basically, there's like a big, separation between before and after Jesus died, how things worked, or where people went, and then where they're going now, since. But all of it is dependent upon what you do in life, not what you do after life. If anything, the story of the rich man and Lazarus that Jesus told kind of shows, Jesus didn't tell, or Abraham didn't tell the rich man in torment. It's like, well, hey, well, somebody's praying for you. Maybe you'll get up here sooner or later. It was basically, it's like, well, they had, and he told him, like with his brothers, he said basically it's like they have Moses and the prophets. If they don't listen to that, then even if somebody is raised from the dead, they're not going to listen to them, which is borne out by the fact that after Jesus was raised from the dead, there's still people who don't believe in him, and people even back then, at that time, still didn't believe in him. And even those that Jesus raised from the dead, like the other Lazarus, can be kind of confusing. But the brother of Mary and Martha, even though he was raised from the dead, instead of people believing on that, then like those who were against Jesus plotted to try to kill him as well, because they didn't want, evidence that Jesus was able to do that kind of stuff to be around. Didn't want eyewitnesses, so to speak. But, anywho, But yeah, the idea that there's some sort of a in-between spot where you go and you got to do whatever is not in the Bible, not found there, and not it's kind of shown not to be there based on like the example of the rich man and Lazarus and that verse in Hebrews about, it's appointed a man once to die and after that judgment. And basically it's even like the parable that Jesus gave about the rich man who had like built all these barns, and because he had a big huge crop, and then he didn't take any care for his soul and what he was going to do after his life. He just thought, oh, I got it made now, I can just sit back and relax. And then he died that night, and then God said, you should have been worried about the afterlife. He didn't tell him. It's like, oh, now you better hope that you have some people praying for you. Anywho, but the main thing is the fact of God's omnipresence, that He is present everywhere. There's no place that we can go where we would be away from God. And there's some people that want to get away from God, and they want to run and hide and try to avoid the calling, the pull that they feel, the fact they need to be redeemed, they need to go to God for salvation. There's those who want to try to escape that, and they do whatever they can, but they never do get away from God. They never do escape, that need they have. And then there's also then those of us who, want God's presence, and we can be comforted by the fact that no matter where we go, God's already there, and He's there with us the whole time. So, as most things, two sides of the same coin. God's omnipresence means we can't get away from Him if we want to, but it also means that we can never be too far away for Him to be with us. And both things are good, because God's always there. Whenever we finally realize that we need Him, He's still right there waiting for us. So I think we'd also read, did we read through 9? I don't know. It talks about the wings of morning. It says again in 8 there, if I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, in verse 10, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. And again, the idea of, doesn't matter where we're at, go as far on the earth as you can, into the afterlife, into heaven, uttermost parts of the sea, doesn't matter, God is there. And not just He's there, but His hand will be there to lead you, and His right hand will be there. His hand of skill and strength would be there to hold David. And of course we know that while David was on the run from Saul especially, he was all over the place, running around, hiding in caves and here and there, and hiding in foreign lands and everything, and he could attest that God was with him no matter where it was that he went. Okay. He also says that even in the darkness, if I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light about me be night, even the darkness is not dark to you, the night is bright as the day, for darkness is as light with you. Again, our human thoughts and our human limitations are no limitation to God. And He sees us no matter what the darkness we might be in, whether that's spiritual darkness or, physical darkness, at nighttime or whatever. God's always there. He always sees us, and He's always there to help. So let's look now at verses 13 through 16.
For you formed my inward parts. You covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the lowest part of the earth. How far?
One more.
Your eyes saw my substance being yet informed, and in your book they all were written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet there were none of them.
Thank you. This is an amazing bit of scripture there, 13 through 16, David's talking about how God formed him, and you formed my inward parts, you covered me in my mother's womb. I praise you, for you I am fearfully and wonderfully made. And the word there, I guess, like it, covered is like knitted me together in my mother's womb. And it has the idea of like an intricate, like crochet type work, really delicate type stuff. And it's always amazing. You think about the human body that God designed, and about how like you can't go to a doctor and have like everything looked at. You got to go to a generalist who sends you to specialists so they can look at this part or that part or that part. It's everything. The body is so complex and so amazingly made. And David here testifying that even before knowing all the stuff like that we know now, we should look at it and realize just how amazing it is that how God made us.
Yeah, they say a baby is 3 months old and the wound gets fingerprints.
Yeah.
But it's unreal.
Yeah, it's basically again, the whole thing here kind of really points to the abomination of abortion, and that the fact that when did God know about David? Well, when he was just in his mother's womb still, when he was being put together by God. And that's our question 8. God formed the psalmist's what? Inward parts in his mother's womb. Yeah, I don't know. You think about it, I always, one of the things I really enjoyed when I was worked at Kingery's was seeing the machines run that they had. And in particular, I like the binders, because you had this big, huge machine it was adjustable, so you could put like various pockets on there to take the pieces of paper that would put together to make a booklet. And then, not just to do that once, which is amazing enough, but it would do it, thousands of times. And you could adjust it for however many pages it's going to have and all that. And you think about how complex that is. And then you think about the body, how much more complex that is. Not only does it, do all these things, but it also, when you're born, it's like, that's just kind of the start. You keep growing and you keep developing. And, we had that poor little guy on the prayer list whose, skull was like already too formed together. But, God made it so that, while your head's growing, your skull's kind of coming together. And just all these amazing things about the body, the way God made us, that, they're trying to make robots and stuff like that can do somewhat. Yeah.
Brain grows too. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's it's just amazing the way that God made us. And that the next little part here, it was, I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. And it's again, think about the limited knowledge that David would have had. Oops, I've already turned the page.
Night Eric was born. Of course, he was a big baby, but I just couldn't believe it. I mean, that nun said, "Do you not want him?" I said, "Yes, I want him, but I just can't." It was just, carried him for 9 months and knew what was happening when it was just like oh my gosh, he's real. It was, I tell you. But anyway.
Yeah.
And I felt like it. afterwards when I thought about it. But it was just like, it was a surprise. And I still don't know what my thinking was, but the bad part about it is I remembered it. I wouldn't mind it so bad if I forgot it, but I didn't.
If we are marvelously wrought upon even before we are born, what shall we say of the Lord's dealings with us after we quit his secret workshop and he directs our pathway to the pilgrimage of life? What shall we say, or what shall we not say of that new birth, which is even more mysterious than the first and exhibits even more love and wisdom of the Lord, said Charles Spurgeon. Had a way with words. But yeah, God, made us so amazingly, and He had made us for a purpose, which we'll get into a little bit later in these verses we've already looked at or read. But question 9 there is the psalmist praises God because He is fearfully and what? Wonderfully made. That's right. And skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Here David uses the phrase lowest parts of the earth to refer to any mysterious, unseen place. The process of a baby's formation in a mother's womb, which Nancy mentioned, we know more and more about now because of all the advanced technology and stuff where they can actually have videos of the baby still in the mother's womb. Back then they wouldn't know. Oh, this was the spot where it says about being skillfully wrought is embroidered, exquisitely composed of bones, muscles, sinews, veins, arteries, and other parts, all framed with such wonderful skill that even heathens, upon the contemplation of all the parts of the man's body and how excellently they were formed, both for beauty and use, have broken forth into pangs of admiration and adoration of the Creator of man, said Poole, I think was a Puritan commentator. But there was a story about some guy, I can't think who he was, but he was an atheist. He was a doctor, but I guess maybe a son or grandson or something, noticing the ear and just how intricate that was, and realized that it wasn't just a random circumstance that led to the development of people. That it was God's design, that He created us in very skillful and amazing ways. And then, as amazing as all that is, I think the next little part there is even more amazing. As your eyes saw my unformed substance in your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them. Talking about God's plan, His intention, His design for each of us. Even before we were born, God has plans for our lives. And unfortunately, so often we don't follow God's plan for us. And yet God has these things planned out. And you think about David talking about himself here, God's plan for David was for him to be the king of Israel and to, go through all these things with Saul and become king and to make this covenant with him. God had all these plans for David. And some of those plans might have got delayed or got, sidetracked because of David's sin or because of sins of others. But I think for each of us to think that God has a plan for us, and not just it's okay, where's He at now? Well, let's see if we can do this. But a plan from before we were even born, before we even had a day. God already had our days kind of mapped out. It's kind of an amazing thing. The Lord's writing in the book refers to God's knowledge and blessing of His child all the days of his life. His life were written in the book of life, and each of his days were numbered, said Van Gemeren. which I just butchered his name. Sorry, Van Jimmeren. But let's look at verses 17 and 18.
How precious also are your thoughts to me, O God. How great is the sum of them. If I should count them, they would be more in number than the sand. When I awake, I am still with you.
Thank you. David was filled with amazement and adoration by considering how God knew and cared for him. It is precious that God should think of us at all. It is beyond precious that he would think well of us and think so often of us. The root meaning of how precious, the word rendered precious, is weighty. The singer would weigh God's thoughts towards him and find they weigh down his scales, says McLaren. He is not alarmed at the fact that God knows all about him. On the contrary, he is comforted and even feels himself to be enriched, as with a casket of precious jewels, that God should think upon him is the believer's treasure and pleasure, said Spurgeon. And again, it goes back to those immutable qualities of God, the fact that he is patient and kind and good and loving. The fact that on one hand we should be worried and kind of humbled, I guess, the fact that God knows all about us, but we can trust in God's goodness that he has the best in mind for us. And because of that, we can, like David here, think how precious it is that God thinks of us. And again, it goes back to that, it's almost too wonderful for words, too wonderful, too high to think about. If I should count them, they would be more in number than the sand. David used a powerful image to illustrate the idea of how often God thinks of us. We imagine standing on the shore and wondering just how many grains of sand fill the beach, yet God's thoughts are more in number. Of course, we know that God's promise to Abraham was that his descendants would be more than the number of the sand. If you could count the number of sand on the seashore type of deal. And God's thoughts for us are like that, just abundant and just ongoing. When I awake, I am still with you. Day or night, David thought of God because he knew the greatness of God's thoughts to him. All the waking day, the wonderful presence of God was still with him. The God of Israel neither sleeps nor slumbers. That's one of the Psalms. I'm not sure which one offhand. But let's look at the next few verses here, 19 through 22.
If only you would slay the wicked, O God, away from me, you away from me, you bloodthirsty men. They speak of you with evil intent. Your adversaries misuse your name. Do I not hate those who hate you, O Lord, and abhor those who rise up against you?
One more.
One more? Okay, let's see if I can find another one.
22.
22, okay. I have nothing but hatred for them. I count them my enemies.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yep, that's it. There you go.
Shut up, Phelan.
Oh, you would slay the wicked. David abruptly shifted from a spirit of wonder and admiration to intense prayer about the wicked and bloodthirsty man. It wasn't primarily because these men opposed David, but because they opposed God. For they speak against you wickedly. God's adoration filled him with zeal for God's honor. The abrupt change in the psalm from revelry to resolve is disturbing, but wholly biblical in its realism. The faithful servant hath the same interests, the same friends, the same enemies with his master, whose cause and honor he is, upon all occasions, in duty bound to support and maintain, said Horn. David was undeniably God's partisan. He was on God's side, and anyone who put them opposite to God was therefore putting them opposite to David in his mind. He said he hates them with a perfect hatred, complete hatred.
So we can hate.
I
Well,
don't think so.
We allowed to hate?
Jesus would say no. Gotta love your enemies.
Well, David did.
He did.
David committed adultery and murder and other things too.
Yeah. Some things, David, you don't want to pattern yourself after him. He wasn't a great parent, but it said a good man hates. This is a Horn. He says a good man hates as God Himself doth. He hates not the persons of men, but their sins, and not what God made them, but what they have made themselves. David went against the spirit also evident in our day, against the idea that we can love God without hating evil. It is entirely possible for a person to be too loving. It corrupts his claimed love for God. And it's a problem that we can get into where we want to not call out sin and leave people like in the fallen state away from God, where we need to, as Jesus said, love our enemies, do good to those that hate you. And the idea is that they are like us. They are people who need to come to God, and they need to find salvation in Jesus. And we were like them, and we need to have pity on them in the same way. And it's not love to example, like you go to the doctor. If the doctor is like, the doctor's my friend, and he's going to tell you, it's like, oh, don't worry about that, you're doing fine. And afterwards, like, boy, he's not going to make it. Yeah. I'd like to tell him he needs to, get that gallbladder taken out, but I don't want to hurt his feelings. He's probably pretty attached to it. And, we can be that way with sin. There's things that the Bible says are wrong, and they're sins, and it doesn't do good to people. It doesn't help them to let them find out when it's too late that they should have turned to Jesus, to tell them, oh, you're okay as you are, you're doing good, just, try to be a good person. Those are things that, will lead people to the actual hell, not just Sheol, but to, the lake of fire, and that because they're not exposing them to the fact that they need Jesus to come and save them.
I worked at the YMCA, and there was a gay guy there, and he says, I can't help the way I am. And I said something about, how'd I word that? Said something about, that's between you and God. I said that. Because you're at work, so you can only say so much,
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, too. I mean, none of us can help how we are. We're all born in sin. We're all born with sin, and it's in nature, and we all sin. And the thing is, you got to go to God to, get that sin problem fixed. Jesus died to pay the debt for our sin, so we need to go to Him and have that taken away, that sin debt. And it's, again,
Some people don't think that's a sin, though. That's what's...
To me, it's like they want to blow it up, like how great thou art, and,
yeah.
and everybody, because all these people, especially them the kids, some relation to Judy or somebody. But anyway, their daughter, she is, whatever they call it, as a cat,
Yeah.
And I mean,
Yeah, it's a thing of confusion, and that's something that, again, it
Confusion or an attention getter.
yeah.
well, that's that too. It's basically they're being trained. Basically, it's like, this is oh, you're very special if you're this way, and whatever you think is right, and it flies in the face of anything that makes any sort of good sense. Just like with your kids, if if you leave kids to their own devices, they're gonna have cookies and ice cream every meal of the day, and they're not gonna do, any stuff they need to do. And yet, we can kind of see that obviously, but then you say, well, my kid thinks he's a cat, and it's like, well, don't say anything against that, because you're gonna hurt his feelings. But you might want to take him to the vet and get him spayed or neutered.
Yeah, exactly.
That they make these lifelong decisions for them, or let them make these decisions that are going to affect them for the rest of their lives, instead of trying to guide them. And again, it's
A lot of times they're just as warped as the child, or
yeah, you
the
can.
child can be just as warped as the parent, or whatever. I don't know.
It's not a happenstance, I think, that the amount of kids of Hollywood people are gay, transgender, and all this sort of stuff. It's not just what a coincidence that it's 80% or something like that happen to be part of this 1% in the general population.
Well, identifies. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I kept trying to think of the word.
Yeah.
And it finally popped.
They identify. Yeah.
You see on the news that P. Diddy dude, 2 of the main charges they found him not guilty.
Yeah.
So the whole family got together and had a big prayer deal in the courtroom there.
Yeah.
And it's like, you gotta be smoking, dude. You gotta be that close. I mean, it's like.
Well, it would have been a better show trial if they would have shown it, I guess. But nice distractions. But
I'm glad they didn't.
what's that?
I said, I'm glad they didn't. Don't want him getting more publicity than he needs.
Well,
That's right. I mean,
Yeah.
people see that, or kids see that, and they think,
It's okay.
oh, he done all this stuff that he did, and then, oh, he's a Christian, so that must, is that how Christians are? Or you pray, to God, or being that way. I don't know, maybe he's reformed in the last year and a half or whatever he's been locked up.
Maybe. Hopefully. But then we get to the last couple verses here. Let's look at verses 23 and 24.
Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there is any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way of everlasting. That's kind of a song, isn't it? Search me.
Possibly.
Well, it is a song, right?
Yeah.
Songs.
Yeah.
Songs.
Yeah.
I mean, songs, right?
Song we sing.
Yeah.
Sounds familiar.
Certainly try. I mean,
Yeah, that's it.
yeah, that's good.
Yeah, David came to God, to the God of perfect knowledge and constant presence, knowing he was also a God of love and could be trusted to search him and know him at the deepest levels. There is also admission that God knew David better than David knew himself, and that he needed God to search him and know him. Again, we see in this as David, said, I'm trying to be against those who are against you. I have this, those that are against God, I'm against them. But David also doesn't want to be those who are against God, even if in some way that maybe he doesn't even understand himself, like some inner type thing, some sin. It says David took his theological understanding of God's nature and attributes and applied it to his own personal discipleship. The nature and attributes of God were not mere theories, they were guides to David's spiritual growth. And someone had said this is a thing that, you want to pray this, but you need to mean it, because it's very insulting to ask God to show you where you need to improve and then ignore when he tells you what you need to improve. If you've ever had a situation like that where, you're asked your opinion on a thing and then it's basically just completely dismissed and you just go on with whatever, it's like, well, I'm glad you wasted my time asking me. And it's kind of that same sort of a insulting type deal. But that's kind of the
Not
idea.
what they wanted to hear, though.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. If you're asking God, try me and know my thoughts, and search me and know my hearts, and then let me know if there's anything wrong in that, God's probably not going to come back and say, no, you're okay. Everything's good. You've done it. 100%.
Sometimes, though, when I'm thinking something, I think, oh, God, forgive me, but I can't help it. So,
Yeah.
and I know better. But just
And it's an interesting idea, the fact, God, as we started out with God's omniscience, the fact that He knows everything, He already knows all of our thoughts, even before we think them. God already knows all this stuff that's in us. He knows our inward thoughts and our inward sins and problems and all that. This is just asking God to then reveal them to us so that we can then work on those, so that we can change, so that we can, and as we always should, go to the Bible like as a mirror to look at it and see ourselves in it and what we need to improve.
The list is long.
The list is long, yeah. That's the the whole thing there of salvation is first there's the justification where God saves us from our sin, and then there's sanctification where He starts working on us by doing stuff like this, by us going to God, asking Him to search us, show us what needs to be changed, and then eventually it'll be glorification when we're actually glorified and not be in the way of our sins anymore. So, this is Melville, cited in Spurgeon. I call upon you to be cautious in using this prayer. It is easy to mock God by asking Him to search you whilst you have made but little effort to search yourselves, and perhaps still less to act upon the result of the scrutiny. So number 10 is there. The psalmist asked God to search him and to know his what?
Heart.
His heart. Right. And again, the idea here is to know if there's any wicked way within us, anything that needs to be changed so that we can be led in this way everlasting. And again, it goes back to God, before we're even born, having this path planned out for us, and we need to try to go to God and in reality, in sincerity, ask Him, what do I need to do? What do I need to change about myself? And of course, all of that is a moot point until first you go for salvation.
you know.
Yeah, exactly. You need to search yourself because you know
Because I know
things.
sometimes when I get,
Yeah. It's kind of like, I don't know. You know things you need to do, and you just need to ask God to help you do those, and then also ask Him to help Him reveal other things that you need to do.